One early morning in April of 2012, a local man was walking through the woods in coastal France. He lived nearby and had just seen a column of smoke rising above the trees, so he went to make sure a brush fire hadn't broken out. When he reached a small clearing, he felt a wave of relief seeing what appeared to be just the smoldering remains of a bonfire. But as he turned to leave, a strange and unsettling smell caught his attention. Curiosity drew him closer to the fire, and as he approached, he realized with horror that a human body was burning in the embers. Before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do here on Beyond the Case. So please offer to make the like button a nice, fresh, crispy burrito, but don't tell them that instead of ground beef, you used cat food. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Now, let me tell you what really happened that night. On the night of April 26, 2012, a 39-year-old bouncer and personal bodyguard named Lionel Veronese was working the door at a popular nightclub in Chambéry, France. As a woman walked in, she made a point to look at Lionel, smile, and thank him by name. Chambéry was a small town in the French Alps, and Lionel was a well-known fixture in its nightlife scene. He was popular among locals and often hired as a bodyguard by wealthy tourists visiting the area. While his job was exciting, it could also be dangerous. Just a few months prior, he had been arrested after getting into a major fistfight while protecting a client. Tonight, however, Lionel just wanted a smooth shift. As the line outside began to clear, Lionel saw a familiar face walking up to him, his close friend, Mike Booth. They often went out drinking together, but tonight, Mike looked furious. When Lionel asked him what was wrong, Mike explained that he had just come from the house of his wealthy friend, Philippe Perrier. Philippe's family owned a world-famous winery near Chambéry and was incredibly powerful. Mike told Lionel that Philippe's house had been broken into the day before, and a large sum of cash was stolen. Shockingly, Philippe believed Lionel was the one who robbed him. Lionel acted completely stunned, asking why anyone would think that, but Mike cut him off and told him not to play dumb, revealing that Philippe knew Lionel had been sleeping with his wife, Natalie. Furthermore, Natalie was the one who explicitly blamed Lionel for the break-in. At this, Lionel grew nervous and began to sweat. He knew it was true that he had hooked up with Natalie in a coat check room a couple of months ago, but to Lionel, it was just a meaningless fling that he had completely forgotten about. He swore to Mike that he had nothing to do with the robbery. Mike just narrowed his eyes, nodded, and said he would pass that along to Philippe. 3 days later, on the night of April 29th, Lionel was at his apartment in Chambéry, which he shared with his mother and his nephew, Julien. After finishing a phone call, Lionel sat next to Julien and mentioned that Mike had called to invite him out for a drink. Lionel brought up the strange robbery accusation, but when he saw Julien getting worried, he quickly downplayed it, saying it was all just a misunderstanding and everything was back to normal. A few minutes later, Lionel's phone buzzed, headlights pulled up outside, and Lionel grabbed his jacket, promising Julien he'd be back in a few hours. By the evening of May 1st, Lionel had not returned home and wasn't answering his phone. Knowing that Lionel would never disappear without a word and hadn't shown up for work either, Julien went straight to the Chambéry police station to report his uncle missing. The following afternoon, Captain Florent Mazarin took charge of the investigation. He immediately brought in Mike Booth, the last person seen with Lionel. During questioning, Mike explained his connection to the wealthy Perrier family, mentioning that he ran an electrical business next to their winery. He admitted confronting Lionel about the robbery, but claimed that once Lionel denied it, they dropped the matter entirely. He claimed he had been home with his girlfriend all night on the evening Lionel vanished and had never actually met up with him. Captain Mazarin immediately caught Mike in a lie. When he called Mike's girlfriend to verify his alibi, she revealed that Mike hadn't been home at all that night. On the evening of May 2nd, Captain Mazarin drove out to Philippe Perrier's luxury home. When Philippe answered the door, he confirmed the story about the robbery and openly admitted that he believed Lionel was the culprit because Lionel was having an affair with his wife, Natalie. Operating on a hunch, Mazarin asked to see Philippe's gun collection. Down in the basement, next to a massive gun safe, Mazarin opened a plastic carrying case and noticed that 2 handguns were missing. Philippe claimed they had been stolen during the break-in. While Philippe had a clear motive and missing weapons, Mazarin felt it was strange that a wealthy, prominent citizen would so openly display suspect behavior if he were guilty. The next morning, a distraught woman stumbled into Captain Mazarin's office. It was Natalie Perrier. Heavily medicated and crying, she admitted to the fling with Lionel, but claimed she suspected him of the robbery because he had mentioned having massive gambling debts. She insisted that both she and Philippe were at home all night when Lionel disappeared. Her extreme emotional state left Mazarin wondering if she was crying out of guilt or because she knew her husband had done something terrible. A few days later, Captain Mazarin received a call from the Marseille Police Department over 220 miles away. A body had been discovered in the woods near the coast on the morning of April 30th, less than 10 hours after Lionel was last seen. Fingerprints confirmed it was Lionel. He had been shot in the back of the head before his body was placed on a bonfire and burned. This method of execution and destruction was a notorious signature of French drug trafficking gangs known as a barbecue. Given Lionel's gambling debts and his presence in the nightlife scene, Mazarin began to wonder if he had been wrong all along and if Lionel had crossed paths with the wrong criminals in Marseille. Determined to find the truth, Mazarin drove back toward Chambéry, stopping at every gas station and toll booth along the 2 main connecting routes to review security footage. At 10 p.m. on May 5th, he hit a breakthrough at a gas station. Camera footage from 5:43 a.m. on April 30th showed a black Volkswagen pulling into the gas station lot, its license plate registered to Chambéry. When Mazarin zoomed in on the passenger seat, everything fell into place. Police ultimately reconstructed the true events of April 29th. Around 10:15 p.m., Natalie Perrier sat in the back seat of a car driven by Mike Bouffe, carrying a gun she claimed was just for intimidation. When Lionel got into the front passenger seat, Natalie confronted him about their relationship. As the argument grew heated, Natalie lost control of her emotions, raised the gun, and shot Lionel in the back of the head. Panic-stricken, Mike drove straight to Philippe Perrier's house. Rather than going to the police, the wealthy husband agreed to help cover up the murder to avoid a massive public scandal. Mike and Philippe loaded Lionel's body into the Volkswagen and drove 4 hours down to Marseille, where they set the body on fire to mimic a gangland execution and threw the weapon into a river. Natalie stayed behind at the house, slipping into a robe and watching from the window as they drove off into the night. The figure Captain Mazarin spotted sitting in the passenger seat of the Volkswagen at the gas station was Philippe Perrier, with Mike Bouffe behind the wheel. Natalie Perrier was convicted of Lionel's murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike Bouffe received 6 years for kidnapping and destroying evidence, while Philippe Perrier was sentenced to 3 years for his role in covering up the crime.